So now that the first round of the 2020 Stanley Cup Playoffs is officially over, another team went down last night, and that was the Montreal Canadiens as they were eliminated by the Philadelphia Flyers in 6 games. We'll be taking a look at this series, a recap of each game, and just my thoughts on the series overall. We'll be taking a look at that in this video. If you like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey, want to help us get to 500 subscribers, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and a subscribe down below. And let's take a look at this series between the Philadelphia Flyers and the Montreal Canadiens. All right, so looking at this Eastern Conference matchup between the number 1 seeded Philadelphia Flyers and the number 8 seed Montreal Canadiens. Going into this series, the Philadelphia Flyers did very well in their round robin. They won all their games. Carter Hart looked very solid for the Philadelphia Flyers. Meanwhile, the Montreal Canadiens had just coming off dispatching the Pittsburgh Penguins and really doing a nice job and pretty convincing fashion taking out the Pittsburgh Penguins. Going into this series, you had the Carter Hart versus Carey Price fight in between the pipes. 2 very good goaltenders, some of the best goaltenders right now in the NHL. And this was going to be an interesting Eastern Conference matchup. Going into Game 1, the Philadelphia Flyers were the team to beat. And not only in the Eastern Conference, but probably in the NHL. I would say a lot of people have them as the Cup favorite right now. But we'll be taking a look here at Game 1. It was a tight game between both sides. The Montreal Canadiens actually started things off. They got the first goal of the series, and they were the ones kind of, the Philadelphia Flyers got the first goal. They set the momentum, and that was huge for them. That really, you see Voracek get one halfway through the first period. That seemed to set the tone for the game. Shea Weber would get one in the second period, and Joel Farabee, who has had a pretty nice playoffs this year, he puts in the game winner in Game 1, a 2-1 victory for the Philadelphia Flyers. Carter Hart had a very nice outing. He had 27 saves out of 28 shots. The power play, the Montreal Canadiens scored their 1 goal on the power play. So 5-on-5 seemed to be a little bit of an issue there for the Montreal Canadiens, but they did score on the power play. They were able to get things done. And the Philadelphia Flyers went 1 for 3 on the power play in Game 1. Now moving on to Game 2, it was all Montreal as the Montreal Canadiens defeated the Philadelphia Flyers by a score of 5-0. There was nothing in this game that would say that the Flyers were going to win. It started off early and often. Tomas Tatar, just over a minute into the first period, gets things going for the Montreal Canadiens, and that's as close as this game would get. Jesperi Kotkaniemi gets his 3rd of the postseason with a goal there. Later in the first period, Tatar would get on the board again, as well as Yoel Armia, and to cap it off, a 2-goal performance for both Tomas Tatar and Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and it's a 5-0 victory for the Montreal Canadiens. The Canadiens looked really solid in this game. They poured on the shots, 32 shots. The Philadelphia Flyers took a lot of penalties. It was 6 power plays for the Montreal Canadiens. They scored on 2 of them. And the big thing for the Philadelphia Flyers, they went 0 for 5 on the power play in Game 2. That was really an issue at certain points in this series for the Flyers. So moving on to the Islanders series, that's something that we'll be taking a look at. But not, to say the least, the Montreal Canadiens definitely set the momentum and kind of turned the tide after a difficult Game 1. And then we move on to Game 3, where the Philadelphia Flyers just found a way to just beat them, just playing that rough hockey. And, we talk about finding different ways to win, right? And this is a way to win that, especially in the playoffs, is critical. Scoring, winning those 1-0, 2-1, 3-1 games. Philadelphia Flyers were able to do that. And this one, Jacob Voracek, who started this series off with goals, he would get the only one in this game, just a little over 5 minutes into the first period. That was the only goal we saw in this game. A shutout for Carter Hart, 23 save shutout for Hart. Again, power play for both teams was a real issue. 0 for 3 for the Montreal Canadiens and 0 for 6 for the Philadelphia Flyers. So in 2 games, the Philadelphia Flyers went 0 for 11 on the power play. Yikes. That's something that we would see hopefully get addressed as the series gets along. But that starts to become a theme here for the Philadelphia Flyers as the series goes along. And the Montreal Canadiens just were not able to get on the board in Game 3. So now we move on to Game number 4. And the Philadelphia Flyers looking solid again. A 29 save shutout for Carter Hart once again, so he gets 2 shutouts in this series. This is our 3rd shutout of the series because Carey Price shut out the Flyers in Game number 2. Michael Raffl got the scoring going, and Philip Myers with the 2nd goal. That would be the only 2 goals we see for the game. Again, really solid effort by Carter Hart. 29 saves on the game. Power play, again, 0 for 3 for the Philadelphia Flyers. So that's 0 for 14 in the in games 2, 3, and 4. Definitely something they're going to have to work on against the New York Islanders. The Montreal Canadiens, not much better. They went 0 for 2 on their power play, and now that's 2 consecutive games that the Montreal Canadiens have not been able to get one past Carter Hart, and that was really the difference maker as we get along in this series. And then we move on to game number 5. The Montreal Canadiens are up against the wall in desperation mode, and they find a way to get things done. A 5-3 victory for the Montreal Canadiens. They find a way to squeak one out against the Philadelphia Flyers. A really solid game. Joel Armia gets on the board. He gets 2 in this game, but not before Jakub Voracek gets his 3rd and 4th goals of the postseason. It's a 2-2 game in the second period, but Brendan Gallagher, which became a storyline by the end of this game. Brendan Gallagher gets a goal. It's a 3-2 lead for the Canadiens heading into the 3rd. He did break his jaw, though, so he would be out for the remainder of the postseason, which is a shame. That would be his last game, as the Canadiens have been eliminated. And then the 3rd period, the young guys start to take over. Joel Farabee and Nick Suzuki each exchange goals for the Canadiens and the Flyers. And Philip Deneau gets the next goal late in the game, an empty netter, 1942 into the 3rd period, so a late goal there. But Nick Suzuki, we start to see his name come on the board as he gets a goal late in that one. The game winner for the Montreal Canadiens in Game 5. And then the shots, I mean, again, the power play much better for the Philadelphia Flyers. 3 for 7 in the game, 1 for 3 for the Montreal Canadiens. So both teams did start to get things going on the power play. Not great, but a lot better than that 0 for 14 that the Philadelphia Flyers had in the previous 3 games. And for the Montreal Canadiens, they were finally able to get back on the board, put up some goals. It seems like, you look at Game 2, they scored 5. And then 3 and 4, they score none. And then they score 5 again. Really 4 because the empty netter. But, it was really, they needed to find a way to get goals. They were able to do that in that game. So now, once again, in Game 6, the Montreal Canadiens are once again back against the wall. They had some defensive changes in their lineup. Not to mention that Brendan Gallagher would be out for the remainder of the series due to a broken jaw. So things were definitely changing on the fly for the Montreal Canadiens. And they were going to have like I said, they were going to have some adversity going throughout this series. And then we go to Game 6. And a really interesting game here by the Philadelphia Flyers. They only get 17 shots on goal compared to the Montreal Canadiens' 33 shots. They almost doubled the Philadelphia Flyers in the shots. But who won the game? That's right, the Philadelphia Flyers. The Philadelphia Flyers go home with the victory. They get a goal in the second period to take the lead, and that would end up being the game winner, a 3-2 victory for the Philadelphia Flyers. The 2 goals early in the first period for the Flyers, you knew it was going to be difficult for the Montreal Canadiens to score goals late. Nick Suzuki, though, really showed what he can do. He scored his 3rd and 4th goals of the postseason. Fortunately, that would be the last goals that the Montreal Canadiens would score this offseason, but a really solid offseason for Nick Suzuki. We know how good this player is going to be. Alex Romanov coming in as well next year. And Carey Price looks like himself again. There were a couple of weird goals here and there, especially in this game. The first 2 goals, losing the face-off, and then one that kind of squibbled through between his pads. And Kevin Hayes got the goal with him sliding across. So just a couple of things with the Montreal Canadiens. They just, the Philadelphia Flyers are playing very well right now, and those early goals that they scored, they seem to be scoring goals at opportune times, and that was the difference in this series. Neither team was great on the power play. It seemed like both teams at points have struggled to score goals, but the Montreal Canadiens just did not have the depth, and I think that was a big part of why they lost this series. But hey, look at it this way. I mean, yes, you didn't get Alexis Lafreniere. Yes, you lost in the first round, but the Montreal Canadiens are a legit contender, and I think once we see some of those young guys continue to develop, get a little bit older, I think there's going to be a really solid Montreal Canadiens team moving forward. Not to mention they have their first-round pick this year as well, so maybe they move that to pick up another guy, or they draft that player and maybe he comes in a year or two just to add some depth. So I really like what the Montreal Canadiens look like going into the future. As for the Philadelphia Flyers, they have a test ahead of them in the New York Islanders, 2 teams that have really struggled on the power play and on special teams. That's been an issue for both the Islanders and the Flyers. So it's going to be interesting to see how things play out with that kind of the chess match. The lines are going to be interesting because both teams have some very solid depth. They aren't super star, they don't have a ton of superstar talent at the top on either team. But I'll talk about that in my preview. But the Philadelphia Flyers have a heck of a test in front of them, and it reminds me a lot of the Islanders with how the Flyers have been playing here against the Montreal Canadiens in this series. They play very similar games. It's going to be an interesting matchup to see how that goes. So let me know in the comment section down below. What do you think of this series? The Montreal Canadiens fans out there, I know you're disappointed. Like I said, the future looks bright for the Canadiens. And the fact that Carey Price is healthy, and it seems like Nick Suzuki, even seeing Jesperi Kotkaniemi, who got sent to the minors, and he seems to be getting things going, that's huge right now for the Montreal Canadiens. So comment down below as well, Philadelphia Flyers fans. Are you excited for the series against the Islanders? Let me know in the comment section down below. And if you like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey, and want to see the latest news around the NHL, and want to help us get to 500 subscribers, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and a subscribe down below. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.